dos nossos programas recentes, nós mostramos aqui as origens do personagem Drácula, que é o mais famoso de todos os vampiros. Muita gente falou, bom, tudo bem, o Drácula é legal, mas e o Frankenstein? Como o Cine Mundi é um programa sem preconceito contra nenhum tipo de monstro, com vocês, as origens de Frankenstein.
Sometimes I think we film historians are a bit like mad scientists, poking around in dusty vaults, stitching together our research, trying to give a jolt of new life to Hollywood's forgotten heritage. Fortunately, one film that's never been forgotten is James Whale's Frankenstein, one of the most influential and imitated motion pictures of all time. When the film was first released in 1931, Universal added a special prologue, part showmanship, but partly out of real apprehension that Frankenstein might be too much for nervous audiences of the Great Depression.
I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now is your chance to, well, we've warned you.
Most people have come to know the story of Frankenstein through the medium of motion pictures, especially the films produced by Universal and starring Boris Karloff. But the original tale was the work of a precocious teenaged writer, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. Published anonymously in its first edition, Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus, was the result of a literary parlor game she played with Percy Shelley and Lord Byron during a rainy vacation in Switzerland in the summer of 1816.
Come, Mary. Come and watch the storm.
You know how lightning alarms me.
They were all holed up in there. The weather was bad, and somebody came up with the idea, I think it might have been Percy or Lord Byron, that they should have a writing contest.
Frightened of thunder, fearful of the dark, and yet you have written a tale that sent my blood into icy creeps. Look at her, Shelley. Can you believe that bland and lovely brow conceived of Frankenstein? A monster created from cadavers out of rifled graves?
Well, my father had been in Hollywood about 10 years when he made Frankenstein in 1931, and what most people don't know is that it was his 81st film, I believe. He was in many, many silent films and also in a lot of talkies before Frankenstein. He was having lunch in the commissary, dressed in one of his good suits and looking very spiffy, and James Whale spotted him.
Whale saw his face and was fascinated by the bone structure of it and called him over to have some coffee or something like that.
Whale, as he put it, engaged in general conversation about England and about the problems of English actors and English directors in Hollywood, and then suggested that he had a role for which he would like Boris Karloff to do a screen test, and would Karloff be willing to do it? And Karloff jumped at it without even knowing what it was.
My father used to say his feelings were a bit hurt since he was looking his very best that day, and to be considered for the role of the monster, he thought, but he was wise enough to take the part, and with the help of Jack Pierce and his genius makeup, they went on to make cinema history.
Designer Herman Rossi originally conceived a futuristic look for Frankenstein, but in collaboration with art director Charles Hall and director Whale, the film took on a distinctly Gothic look, with angles and shadows in keeping with Robert Florey's initial expressionist vision. The concept of the burning windmill also originated with Florey, who felt the laboratory should also be situated in the mill. Pre-production concepts for the monster itself by Hall and Rossi were obviously discarded by director Whale, an experienced production designer in his own right.
He was very meticulous about every shadow and every camera setup and the way that the frame is filled so completely to the top. And there's an amazing verticality to the design of his sets. Emotionally, so much of Frankenstein leads up to that moment when the monster sees the sun for the first time and reaches up, trying to touch it. And it feels as though you wonder if the whole verticality of the movie wasn't designed by Whale just to get you to that moment.
Universal spent 4 years developing a sequel to Frankenstein, and it was well worth the wait. In what was finally called Bride of Frankenstein, Karloff returned and brought a whole new dimension to the monster: speech.
I love dead, hate living.
You're wise in your generation.
A talkative monster and the creation of his mate were both elements from the original Mary Shelley novel.
She's alive! Alive!
The Bride of Frankenstein.
Karloff played the monster for a third and last time in Son of Frankenstein. This time he had a companion who did the talking for him, the broken-necked Igor, played by Bela Lugosi.
He's my friend. He does things for me.
Basil Rathbone played the title role of Wolf von Frankenstein.
Is it the old legendary monster of my father's time? Or am I supposed to have whipped one up as a housewife whips up an omelet?
In Ghost of Frankenstein, the relationship between Igor and the monster got even closer.
Your father was Frankenstein, that your mother was the lightning.
Much closer.
I, Igor, will live forever.
Next, Universal paired 2 of its most popular monsters for amplified impact.
I can't do it. I can't destroy Frankenstein's creation. I've got to see it at its full power.
In her introduction to the revised edition of Frankenstein in 1831, Mary Shelley instructed her hideous progeny to go forth into the world and prosper. Exactly 100 years later, Universal took her directive to heart and created the most successful movie monster of them all. The original advertising campaign for Frankenstein featured the tagline, "The monster is loose." And you know, it still is.
O primeiro Frankenstein do cinema é de 1931 e o personagem continua fazendo muito sucesso. Tanto que recentemente nós vimos Frankenweenie, do Tim Burton, e Hotel Transilvânia, também baseado em Frankenstein, todos eles fazendo muita bilheteria por aqui. E logo depois do intervalo você vai ver outro monstro do cinema, Charlie Chaplin.